Now, every time you open SQL Server Management Studio, you need to connect to a SQL Server. So in this video that's entitled Connecting to a SQL Server, I want to show you a couple little tricks that you can use to connect to your server. First of all, notice I'm using Windows Authentication here. Let me close this and close this. I'm going to go back out to the desktop. And I'm going to go down to the taskbar and where I've got this pinned for the SQL Server Management Studio. Click that one time and that will open up the Management Studio. Now when it opens, it's going to give me that little dialog box asking me to connect to a SQL server. Now notice we're connecting to a database engine on a SQL server. Now we can click the little drop down here and connect to analysis services, reporting services, or integration services. We in this course are going to concentrate on a database engine. Now also, you're going to notice that I have local in here, but yours is probably going to come up just like this. And in my case, it's the name of the server that SQL Server was installed on. The name of my server is Server 2. And it shows that I'm using Windows Authentication. I can choose to connect using SQL Server Authentication. I can put in a login and password, but my server has to be set up to accept that, and mine's not right now, so don't worry about it. Once I put all that in there, I can connect, and if all is well and I pass security, there it shows up Server 2, the version of SQL Server, and the login, Server 2 Administrator. And I can see my databases and so forth. Now, anytime I want to disconnect from that server, I can right-click and choose Disconnect. Now, if you ever see this and you're wondering, where did all my stuff go? How do I get back in? I can come over here and say Connect to Database Engine. This will bring this back up. Now, I want to show you something interesting. On my machine, I'm going to call up the command prompt. I just did an ipconfig command here. And notice here's my IP address, 172.16.103.144. Well, I can put that in here, 172.16.103.144. And if I remembered correctly, I can connect using the IP address of my SQL Server. That's kind of neat. Notice it shows that I connected with the IP address. There is the login that was used. Okay? So that's kind of interesting that I can do that. I'll disconnect one more time. And then there's kind of the wild card thing, and that is if I'm not really sure about the name, I can put the word local in parentheses, and oftentimes that will work. It will connect to the local SQL Server. Now that's assuming that you're sitting on that SQL Server and you're running the Management Studio. That may or may not be the case. In a production environment, it probably won't be. But in a test environment or the environment we've set up for this course, that will probably work for you. But all of those different things work. But that is how to connect to the database. Now notice you get this little green play button looking triangle here. That means that you have successfully connected and everything's okay. Also keep in mind I can connect again to a database engine, and I could connect to a separate SQL server. And notice I've connected to the same server twice here. Don't let this confuse you. But if I had another SQL server on another box somewhere in my network, I can connect to multiples of these, and I can manage and work with multiple SQL servers from this one interface. So I just wanted you to see, every time you open Management Studio, it is going to ask you to connect, and it's going to remember what you did last time. This is not really a problem, but every time you log back into the Management Studio, you're going to have to connect. Now keep in mind, with Windows Authentication, it knows that I'm Server Administrator 2, and that is mapped into SQL Server, and so it looks like it's not really checking credentials, but it is. It's using the same ones that I used to log on to my machine when I first started it up. So that's just a real quick little group of tips there. I hope it helps on connecting to your SQL Server. And then once you're in your SQL Server, then you can go to the individual databases that you want to work with.